On June 26, 2024, Ramiro Felix Gonzales faced his final moments. 2 decades after a string of appeals, a failed clemency bid, and an unsuccessful attempt to delay his execution to donate a kidney, the state of Texas carried out its sentence. On the other side of the glass, the family of the young woman he murdered sat in silence. In this narrative, let's explore his final meal, the chilling details of his crime, and the last words he left behind. To understand why Ramiro ended up on the execution gurney, we must rewind to the early 2000s, before the headlines erupted, before the tense trials, and the haunting path to death row. Ramiro Felix Gonzales was born on November 5, 1982, in Medina County, Texas, a harsh, arid land where life was as unforgiving as the scorching summer sun. He didn't grow up in a nurturing home, but in a storm of chaos. His father, an addict, vanished from Ramiro's life when he was young. His mother, caught in unstable relationships and precarious jobs, drifted away from motherhood, sinking into her own substance abuse. Ramiro grew up neglected, without regular meals or a set bedtime, surrounded only by the drone of the TV, shouts through thin walls, and the eerie silence of being left alone. Before his teenage years, Ramiro was pulled into the world of drugs. Marijuana came first, followed by pills passed around in the impoverished neighborhoods where everyone sought to numb their pain. By age 10, he was addicted. By 14, he stole to feed his habit. At 16, he faced multiple arrests for petty theft, truancy, and drug possession. School was never a stable refuge. He switched schools yearly, fell behind in every subject, and dropped out before his senior year. The streets became his true home, offering an escape, money, and a fleeting sense of power. Ramiro began dealing drugs not to get rich, but to sustain his addiction. Even in the drug trade, he was seen as erratic, unpredictable, a ticking time bomb. In 2001, things escalated. At just 18, Ramiro committed a grave crime, kidnapping and raping a young woman in her own home. This act landed him in prison with a heavy sentence, marking the first turning point in his life. But it wasn't the end. In prison, Ramiro became a dangerous figure, kept under tight control. No one could have predicted that from behind bars, he would unravel a horrific secret, solving a long, cold case. On January 15th, 2001, Bridget Townsend, an 18-year-old full of life, vanished from a small Texas town. Bridget was someone who stood out. She had a radiant smile, a sharp mind, and a quiet determination. She dreamed of leaving the town, where dusty red roads and barren fields seemed to stifle ambition. She wanted to become something greater, perhaps a journalist, a lawyer, or simply someone living a free life. But that day, she stepped out and never returned. Bridget's family was immediately frantic. This wasn't like her. She left without a bag, without a note, and her phone went silent. Her boyfriend, a small-time drug dealer, claimed he had no idea where she was. Police questioned him, searched the area, and chased every lead but found nothing. No trace, no witnesses, just a painful void where a teenage girl once existed. 4 years passed, and Bridget's case went cold. Posters with her face faded under the sun and wind, leads dried up, and her missing person file gathered dust in the police station. Her family clung to a faint hope that she had run away, that one day she'd return with an explanation. But deep down, they feared the worst had happened, and her killer was still at large. 3 years later, in 2004, Ramiro, serving time for the kidnapping and rape, suddenly told a guard he needed to speak to an investigator. He had information about a missing girl, Bridget Townsend. His claim stunned everyone. "How do you know where she is?" Detectives asked, suspecting a man like Ramiro was just seeking attention. At first, he blamed a Mexican drug lord, saying the man killed Bridget, and he only helped hide the body. The story sounded like a clumsy lie, but investigators listened. Then Ramiro shifted his story, accusing Bridget's boyfriend of the murder, claiming he only assisted in disposing of the body. Under intense questioning, his lies unraveled. Ramiro finally confessed the horrific truth. He was the killer. Ramiro detailed his crime. Desperate for drugs, he knew Bridget's boyfriend had a stash. When he called their home, Bridget answered, saying her boyfriend wasn't there. That was enough for Ramiro to act. He went to the house, broke in, and when Bridget caught him, he didn't flee. He forced her into a car, drove to a remote area. According to him, Bridget begged for her life, offering anything, even sex. Ramiro raped her, then, without hesitation, shot her twice in the head with the .357 Magnum. He buried her body in a desolate field and went on with his life as if nothing had happened. No remorse, no second thoughts, just chilling silence. Ramiro's confession wasn't just a shock. It was the key to unlocking a buried truth. He led investigators to Bridget's burial site. One early morning in Medina County, as the sun rose, Ramiro, handcuffed, sat quietly in a police car. He stared out the window, as if facing a memory no one else could see. The car stopped, gravel crunching under the tires, and he nodded. Here. They stepped into a barren landscape, dry grass rustling, wind whistling through mesquite trees. Ramiro pointed to a patch of ground. Dig here. A heavy silence fell, suffocating. With each shovelful, something horrific emerged. A plastic bag, a scrap of fabric, an unmistakable stench, then human bones. Bridget's skull was intact, 2 bullet holes through the back, a painful answer to the question her family had carried for 4 years. There was no doubt left. To the police station, officers quickly drafted charges: capital murder. The prosecution was relentless. They called Ramiro a cold, ruthless predator, likely to kill again if not stopped. They demanded the death penalty, emphasizing this wasn't a momentary lapse, but the act of a societal threat. Ramiro's appointed lawyer tried to defend him, portraying him as a deeply damaged man, raised in poverty, addiction, and psychological issues from childhood. They recounted his traumatic youth, hoping the jury would show mercy. But the prosecution didn't budge. They presented Ramiro's full confession, every sickening detail in his own words. They displayed crime scene photos, the shallow grave, the desolate field, Bridget's shattered skull with clear bullet holes. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence. The jury didn't take long to decide. Ramiro was convicted of capital murder. They didn't recommend life imprisonment. They chose death. In 2006, the judge read the sentence, his voice echoing in the quiet courtroom. Ramiro stared at the floor, expressionless, unblinking. He would face death by lethal injection, but the journey to that day would be long and tumultuous. Why did Ramiro confess? The question lingered after the trial. He was already serving life for kidnapping and raping Florence T., another woman. No one forced him to speak, and he could have taken Bridget's secret to his grave. So what drove him to talk? Some believe Ramiro was haunted not by guilt, but by Bridget's shadow. In prison, the noise never stopped. Slamming doors, shouting inmates, endless nights. But in rare moments of quiet, Ramiro faced the face of the girl he killed. Others doubted his motives. They thought Ramiro was playing a game, seeking attention or some benefit. In prison, power doesn't come from freedom, but from information. And Ramiro held a secret an entire town had sought for 4 years. Where Bridget Townsend was buried. Whatever the reason, Ramiro's confession changed everything. It brought closure to Bridget's family, but also set him on an irreversible path. Death row! From here, his story wasn't just about crime, but about change, remorse, and the question of whether a person can atone for the unforgivable. On death row, Ramiro lived in a world of concrete and steel. Each day was identical. Gray walls, a steel toilet, a tiny window leading nowhere. But in that monotony, something in him began to shift. He was no longer the brash young man who'd kicked down doors for drugs. Ramiro started reading mostly the Bible and spiritual books. He wrote, jotting down thoughts on prison paper. He spoke with the chaplain, who listened without judgment. Slowly, Ramiro said he found faith, a faint light, in the darkness of his life. I did terrible things, he told a prison volunteer, but I believe I was meant to tell the truth. Bridget's family deserved peace. He wrote letters to Bridget's family, begging forgiveness, knowing it might never come. He signed them with a new name, Ramiro Felix Gonzales, son of grace. Some believe this change was genuine. The prison chaplain described him as a quiet, reflective man, far from the criminal of years past. Others, including Bridget's family, were skeptical. They saw it as an act, a late attempt to save himself or leave a better legacy. But Ramiro's transformation didn't slow the wheels of justice. He appealed multiple times, in 2009, 2012, and 2015, but every court, from state to federal, even the U.S. Supreme Court, denied him. In 2016, he received his first execution date, but legal delays pushed it back. In 2022, Ramiro made a surprising request: delay his execution to donate a kidney to a stranger. He said he wanted to give life to make up for the one he took, but the courts, skeptical of his motives, denied it, citing logistical issues. Ramiro kept emphasizing one thing: I don't want to run anymore. Texas can kill me, but I couldn't leave this world without giving Bridget's family closure. On June 26, 2024, the summer heat scorched Huntsville, Texas. Inside the stark walls of the Walls Unit prison, Ramiro had hours left to live. His legal journey had spanned over 2 decades, filled with appeals, hopes, and failures. In June 2024, Texas issued his final execution order, scheduling it on Bridget's birthday. A painful but poignant coincidence. Her mother, Patricia Townsend, called it a gift from the state. the day her daughter's killer would leave the world, on the day she entered it. In a final effort, Romero's lawyers filed for clemency. They spoke of his traumatic childhood, abandonment, abuse, exposure to drugs from a young age. They highlighted his prison transformation, how he found faith, wrote apologies to Bridget's family, and lived a quiet, reformed life. But on June 24, the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles unanimously denied clemency. They also rejected a 6-month reprieve. The final door closed. On the morning of June 26th, the air around Huntsville was still. Protests outside the prison were smaller than expected. Some held signs supporting Ramiro, believing in his redemption. Others carried Bridget's photo, reminding the world of the life taken. Romero's last meal was fried chicken steak with gravy, mashed potatoes, green beans, and sweet tea, like every other inmate. As Texas had abolished special meal requests, he spent his final hours with the chaplain, praying and writing a short letter to his family, thanking them for not giving up on him. At 6:45 p.m., prison officials led Ramiro into the execution chamber. Witnesses included reporters, prison officials, and families of both the victim and the condemned. Ramiro lay on the gurney, strapped down under cold fluorescent lights. When the warden asked if he had final words, Ramiro took a deep breath and spoke, his voice steady but emotional. "I'm sorry. I took a precious person from this world. Bridget, I know I can't fix it, but I hope you find peace. To your family, I pray you find healing and may God give you strength. I was lost, but I found faith. I'm ready to go home now." At 6:50 p.m., a dose of pentobarbital was injected into Ramiro's veins. His heart stopped and he was pronounced dead. Outside the prison, Bridget's brother, David Townsend, faced the press, his voice steady but pained. "Justice has been served. It's been a long, painful journey. He may say he changed, but we remember what he did. It's over now." Her mother, Patricia, didn't hide her bitterness. "I don't forgive him. Plenty of people have tough childhoods, but they don't kill. He chose that path and got what he deserved." Ramiro's lawyer issued a statement describing him as a deeply spiritual, generous, remorseful man transformed by years of reflection in prison. But the justice system, like Bridget's family, remained unmoved. Ramiro Felix Gonzales became the 8th person executed in the U.S. in 2024 and the 2nd in Texas. His death closed a 23-year chapter of violence, addiction, grief, and despair. For Bridget's family, June 26 was no longer just her birthday. It was the day they watched her killer leave the world, bringing a fragile closure to a pain that would never fade. But no one could bring back Bridget, her smile, her dreams, or the future she deserved. Ramiro's story is a dual tragedy. A young woman's life was stolen, and a young man lost to addiction and violence found redemption only when it was too late. He called it salvation. Bridget's family called it justice. But whatever it's called, what was lost can never be regained. This story isn't just about crime and punishment, but about choices, consequences, and the question of whether a person can truly change or merely make peace with themselves before facing death.